The Committee of Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee of Transportation and Infrastructure will come to order. First order of business, I'd like to welcome our witnesses and thank them for being here today. I ask unanimous consent that our witnesses' full statements be included in the record without any objections so ordered. At this time, before we start, first of all, I want to apologize for votes and getting started at about an hour and 20 minutes late, so I thank you for your indulgence. I want to turn it over to Chairman Schuster for a comment.
I thank the chairman and want to welcome Mr. Schaeffer from the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. Thanks for being here today, and all of you for coming to testify. I have a statement that I wanted to give related to, but different than the topic here today. Today, the Obama administration released a proposed rule that would dramatically expand the federal jurisdiction over waters and wet areas in the United States, and I'm sure the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau is going to be very interested in seeing how this progresses. But this is another example of a disturbing pattern of the imperial presidency that seeks to use brute force and executive action while ignoring Congress. Our concern is this is going to unilaterally broaden the scope of the Clean Water Act and the federal government's reach into everyday lives that will have adverse effect on farmers, on contractors, on people's backyards, for that matter. It will impact the nation's economy, threaten jobs, invite costly litigation, restrict the rights of landowners, states, local governments to make decisions about their lands. This massive federal jurisdiction grab was the subject of failed legislation in the 110th and the 111th Congress. Strong bipartisan opposition, I repeat, strong bipartisan opposition prevented those bills from moving forward. Defeated in Congress, now the Obama administration is trying to achieve this federal power expansion through rulemaking. This proposed rule supposedly aims to clarify which water bodies are subject to federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act, which this committee has jurisdiction over. But I'm extremely concerned that there are serious flaws with this process. Twice, the Supreme Court has told the agencies that there are limits to the federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act and that they had gone too far in asserting their authority. Now the administration has taken those Supreme Court rulings and cherry-picked discrete language from them in an attempt to gain expanded authority over new waters rather than heeding the directive of the court. It is the responsibility of Congress, not the administration, to define the scope of the jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act. Regulations of this nation's water must be done in a manner that responsibly protects the environment without unnecessary and costly expansion of the federal government. We can continue to protect our waters without unreasonable and burdensome regulations on our small businesses, farmers, and families. I intend to hold oversight hearings on this issue in the coming weeks and to make sure that they're not able to move forward with an expanded power because, again, I think that as Chairman Gibbs and I were talking before, we're not certain what this means, but we've got a sick feeling in our stomachs that we know what's coming and it's going to affect all of Americans in a negative way. So we're going to be vigilant and make sure that this committee and the Congress keeps its jurisdiction and its constitutional authority as we move forward. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for yielding me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make a kind of a brief statement on that same issue. I think I haven't had a chance to delve through the rule because it just came out this afternoon, but I think it's nearly 400 pages long, I heard, and very concerned about the possible jurisdiction overstretch of the United States Environmental Protection Agency onto farmers, landowners, county road ditches, anything you can imagine, and what that impact could have on our economy and ability to grow our economy and job creation. So, as Chairman Schuster said, we're looking at that, and I'm sure we'll have some hearings in the near future when we can delve through and see what the rule really all says. But we're concerned about the possible redefining the jurisdictions of waters of the United States versus the navigable waters of the United States. I'll start back to our reason we're here today. We're here to talk about the role of water quality trading in achieving clean water objectives. And first, I'd like to welcome everybody for coming. Today, we will hear from several public and private sector stakeholders on the potential use of water quality trading as an innovative, market-based mechanism to cost-effectively achieve local water quality improvements. The quality of our nation's waters has improved dramatically in the United States since the enactment of the Clean Water Act in 1972. However, water quality challenges remain, and achieving the next step in water quality improvement is becoming more difficult. Many of today's remaining water quality problems are more dispersed, and removing additional pollutants from private, industrial, and public wastewater facilities is becoming extremely expensive and difficult to achieve. Addressing these remaining water quality problems will require new tools and new and innovative forms of implementation. Water quality trading is increasingly being looked into as an innovative, market-based mechanism to cost-effectively achieve water quality improvements in some watersheds. The basic theory behind trading is that certain pollutant sources in a watershed may be able to achieve the same degree of control as others in the same area, but at a lower cost. Trading programs allow sources with relatively low cost to generate credits by reducing loads in amounts greater than what is required of them. These credits can then be sold to others for whom the cost to achieve the same reductions are relatively much higher, thus achieving the same or better water quality improvement at lower overall costs. Water quality trading gained my attention several years ago when I was a member of the Ohio House of Representatives and assisted in the creation of a successful water quality trading program in Holmes County, Ohio, my home county. A local cheese producer in Holmes County was facing a regulatory dilemma with its plans to expand its operations and create new jobs. To do so would cause the company to exceed its nutrient allowances under their NPDES permit unless it installed prohibitively expensive wastewater treatment. To solve the problem, the company partnered with the Holmes Soil and Water Conservation District, the Ohio State University, the Ohio EPA, and local farmers in the watershed to manage nutrient runoff, ultimately resulting in a trading program that enabled the company to grow and the watershed's health to improve. This was a win-win for both the economy and the environment. One of our witnesses today is Dr. Richard Moore, who was a direct participant in creating the program. At today's hearing, we will hear from a variety of witnesses about other trading programs around the nation and the issues surrounding water quality trading as means of improving the environment and reaching compliance under the Clean Water Act. And to kind of summarize that, when I said we came from 1972 and the Clean Water Act, we've come a long ways in this country in cleaning up our rivers, our lakes, and our streams, and especially point source. And I think the kind of the tail goes, the first 90% is cleaned up. It's that last 10%. It's hard to clean up, hard to identify, and very expensive, maybe as expensive as clean up the first 90%. And that's why we need to look at these innovative programs, how we can get there and recognize the source, especially in the non-point, and work in innovative methods and cost-effective methods and get to the ultimate goal. So I want to thank the witnesses for being here, and I'll turn my time over to Mr. Bishop. I'm ranking member of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing on water quality trading and its potential use in aiding efforts to improve water quality throughout the nation. In October of this year, we will celebrate the 42nd anniversary of the Clean Water Act. This landmark environmental statute is the reason the nation's waterways have shown dramatic improvement, even as the population has dramatically increased over the last 4 decades. The successes and failures of the Clean Water Act are both expressed in 2 simple statements of fact. In 1972, only 1/3 of the nation's waters met water quality goals. Today, approximately 2/3 of those waters meet water quality goals, but at the same time, we're only halfway there. The challenges of addressing these remaining and chronically impaired waters are great. It is without question that the Clean Water Act is responsible for a tremendous reduction in the amounts of pollutants entering our waters from point sources, the commercial, industrial, and wastewater treatment plants. Where the Act has been less successful, however, is in addressing pollution associated with runoff from urban streets, agricultural sources, and other similar sources. Addressing these non-point source of pollution would significantly advance the goals of fishable and swimmable waters established over 4 decades ago. One concept that has been discussed for addressing chronically impaired water bodies is water quality trading, especially when addressing impairment by nutriments or sediment. Proponents of nutrient trading laud its ability to function as a tool in helping reduce continuing pollution challenges in our nation's waters. In my own area of the country, the potential usefulness of nutrient trading is being tested to reduce the excessive nitrogen and resulting dissolved oxygen concerns of the Long Island Sound. In the Long Island Sound, the neighboring states of New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire are exploring how nutrient trading can play a role in reducing the nitrogen discharges to the Sound and its tributaries. The Long Island Sound states, both individually and through the New England Interstate Water Pollution Control Commission, have been evaluating the effectiveness and potential benefits of both point-to-point trades among the various Clean Water Act permit holders and point-to-non-point trades among the various regulated and unregulated dischargers of nitrogen throughout the watershed. What seems apparent from the first few years of implementation is that nutrient trading still holds the promise of achieving potentially greater water quality benefits at a reduced cost, but a significant number of questions must be resolved first. For example, pollution trading proposals must conform to the current regulatory requirements of the Clean Water Act and must not be viewed as a way of avoiding or lessening existing pollution control authorities. In addition, care must be taken to ensure that the use of trading does not, in fact, make matters worse for localized areas through the creation of pollution hotspots or disproportionately affected certain populations. Also, for a market-based trading program to be most effective, there must be an economic driver to add value to both the credits and the trades. Under the Clean Water Act, that driver is typically created through a rigorous regulatory process that requires local water quality standards be achieved. In the absence of such a driver, the market for trading would be more difficult to establish and less likely to succeed. Finally, Mr. Chairman, because water quality trading involves the potential lessening of existing permit obligations of regulated discharges, legal questions of water quality trading, credit verification, equivalence, and enforceability must be resolved before the effectiveness and potential benefit of trading can be properly evaluated. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and this subcommittee to ensure that more is done to improve the quality of our nation's waters. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. At this time, if other members have a statement, they can submit it in the record, so in the written records, get that right. Since we already made our witnesses wait around for 90 minutes. Before we get started, I will ask unanimous consent that written testimony submitted on behalf of the Association of Clean Water Administrators be included in this hearing's record. Hearing no objection, that's so ordered. And then also our panelists, since you have written testimony, if you could keep your opening statements within 5 minutes or so. That way we'll have time for some questions and answers and give everybody a chance to summarize it. Appreciate that. And today we have 6 witnesses, and our first witness is Mr. Peter Tennant. He's the Executive Director of the Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission. And on behalf of the Ohio River Basin Trading Project and Association of Clean Water Administrators, welcome, Mr. Tennant. The floor is yours. I'd like to pull that mic up to you a little bit.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Bishop. Both of you in your opening comments successfully reduced my remarks by several minutes with some of the points you made. I believe most people are probably aware that our Ohio River Basin program reached an important milestone just a couple of weeks ago with the completion of the first 3 actual trades. These are point to non-point trades of nutrients, and an event that was several years in the making. I would emphasize that at this point it is a pilot program. There are many programs represented here today and represented through the membership of ACWA that have been in the business longer than we have, and you hit on several of them. The cheese factory in your district, which is certainly one of the poster childs for successful trading to solve a regional problem, and the Long Island Sound program. As you pointed out, as we reach a certain milestone of overall achievement of the Clean Water Act goals, the remaining problems are extremely challenging. Innovation is called for, and new approaches just need to be considered and entered into. I would be remiss if I didn't begin by acknowledging the collaborative leadership and membership of our project. While Orsanco has been a key member, bringing state agencies and our other stakeholders together, we wouldn't be where we are today without the leadership of the Electric Power Research Institute, and specifically Jessica Fox, the project director. They have been working on development of this program for about 7 years. Some of the other partners, American Farmland Trust, which has brought their excellent ties to the agricultural community to the table. Troutman and Sanders Law Firm has been a key part. Market Environmental Registry, which runs the actual program that allows you to consummate a trade online. The Ohio Farm Bureau and the University of California at Santa Barbara, which has provided water quality modeling to verify the projected impacts of the trades, all key components. what's important is a project this massive requires that level and more of collaboration. We have chosen to attack nutrients. Nutrients are hard. There's two things about nutrients that I typically point out. Whereas in controlling toxic pollution, toxics are things that we can say, well, they shouldn't be there. Nutrients are something that we can't say that without nutrients there's no life. It's finding the balance, it's finding the right levels, and that's been one of the challenges that state agencies and interstates such as ourselves have faced for a number of years, trying to figure out what's the right dose. Also, there are multiple sources. You can't say that, well, if this one facility or this one sector would control their problem. Every activity can generate nutrients in some degree. But what we found through the trading program is that some nutrients are more readily removed than others, and if we work together, we can actually find solutions that are collaborative, that are represent cost savings, and that are in the long run are effective. Again, our project right now is in a pilot phase. We do not have regulatory drivers. The companies, the electric utilities that have bought the credits are doing so on a stewardship basis. We anticipate somewhere down the road, perhaps we will have the regulatory structure, the requirements that drive more people to look into the program. What I'm optimistic about is the fact that we have laid the groundwork. A number of the things that Mr. Bishop mentioned, the challenges, we've wrestled with those. We've figured out what we think are pretty good approaches to verify the effects of the trades, to set up the equivalency and so forth. And we feel that we have a program that can hit the ground, that can expand greatly when there are wider drivers. So we look forward to it. And again, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today.
Okay, thank you. Our next witness is Mr. James Plattel. I don't know if I said that right or not. He's the Director of Water Quality at Hampton Roads Sanitation District, and he's also on behalf of the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Chairman Gibbs, Ranking Member Bishop, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. As Chairman Gibbs mentioned, my name is Jim Plattel. I'm the Director of the Water Quality Department for the Hampton Roads Sanitation District, or HRSD, in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I also serve as the Water Quality Committee Vice Chair for the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, otherwise known as NACWA. It's my pleasure to be testifying on NACWA's behalf today, as well as the 17 cities and counties in Southeast Virginia, which HRSD serves. If there's one thing I would like to leave you with today is the understanding that water quality trading has worked for HRSD, and it has allowed us to meet our nutrient permit limits while saving our ratepayers millions of dollars. Our success is something I hope we can replicate nationally. Here in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, where excessive amounts of nutrients in rivers and streams are contributing to low dissolved oxygen conditions, the reduction of nutrient loadings to the bay has been a high priority. Traditionally, utilities have relied on technology controls and upgrades to reduce their nutrient loadings at the end of the pipe. Though the technology approach can be effective, it is often extremely expensive. HRSD will spend over $375 million to meet the Bay TMDL requirements through 2017, and even more upgrades may be required when the TMDL is revisited in 2017. Compliance with nutrient permit limits was accomplished by HRSD with expensive plant upgrades, but upgrades were not required at every HRSD facility because nutrient trading between facilities was supported through regulation in Virginia. In 2005, the Virginia General Assembly authorized the concept of nutrient trading, spurring creation of the Virginia Nutrient Credit Exchange Association, which in turn created the framework for nutrient credit trading between watershed facilities, both public and private. Trading in Virginia is based on the concept of the nutrient credit. One nutrient credit represents 1 pound of nutrients removed from a wastewater discharge beyond that required by permit. These credits can be applied to other facilities with nitrogen load limits within the same water segment or downstream of that segment, allowing those other facilities to comply with their respective limits without expending millions of dollars to fund technology upgrades. This approach provides the same environmental result attained by upgrading a facility and has allowed HRSD to select and upgrade the facilities that will provide the greatest amount of nutrient removal at the lowest cost. HRSD currently trades nitrogen and phosphorus credits on an annual load basis, amongst its 13 facilities across 3 different watersheds of the Chesapeake Bay. One of the most significant cost-saving trades for HRSD occurs on the Rappahannock River, where its Urbana plant obtains credits from other permitted facilities on this river in order to comply with its permit limits. The inability to trade nutrient credits on the Rappahannock River would have cost HRSD customers millions of dollars, but there would have been very little nutrient benefit. Despite the availability of nutrient trading, over $2 billion of public and utility customer funds are being invested in Virginia to upgrade many of the public municipal wastewater treatment plants. This investment would have been significantly higher without trading, because every facility did not require a treatment technology upgrade with trading available. I estimate the cost to HRSD's customers would have been 2 to 3 times the cost so far realized without the ability to trade nutrient credits between our facilities. HRSD's experience with trading has been limited to activities with other permitted discharges. Trades with non-permitted sectors have not yet been realized in Virginia. Trading with the non-permitted sectors like crop agriculture has been found to be somewhat problematic due primarily to the uncertainty in estimating, measuring, and controlling the discharges from these sectors. 40 years after the passage of the Clean Water Act, wastewater facilities like HRSD around the country are transforming the way they deliver clean water services. They are becoming utilities of the future, focused on doing more with less and bringing maximum value to their ratepayers and communities. At the heart of this transformation are innovative, market-based approaches like water quality trading that can stretch ratepayer dollars while meeting environmental improvement goals. However, utilities cannot master this transformation alone. They need the support of Congress, which should promote greater adoption of watershed-based solutions. Similarly, EPA should work with delegated states to promote viable and flexible trading programs. Doing so will give utilities the green light to engage in more nutrient transactions that can yield tangible water quality improvements while addressing the affordability concerns of wastewater utilities around the country. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to addressing any questions that the committee may have regarding my testimony.
Thank you. It's always good to hear how you're saving ratepayers' money. Our next witness is Dr. Richard Moore. He's professor of the School of Environmental and Natural Sciences at The Ohio State University, and he's also the executive director of the Ohio State University Environmental Science Network and associate director of academics at the OSU Office of Energy and Environment. And it's good to see you again, Dr. Moore. We go way back, and we started the trading project there in my home county and Holmes County, and it's been a great relationship. So welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs, Ranking Member Bishop. It's great to be here to talk about this topic, and I'm also very grateful to my fellow panelists who we've all come a long way in the topic of water quality trading. The Alpine Cheese Nutrient Trading Plan is Ohio's only program based on a fully functioning NPDES permit. It's a minor permit of 0.14 million gallons per day. Prior to the trading program, the company was out of compliance for its phosphorus limits, and Ohio EPA put a hold on their permit, which included plans for a new plant expansion. Alpine did a partial facility upgrade to 3.2 milligrams per liter and used water quality trading to reduce its concentration to the permit goal of 1 milligram of phosphorus per liter of water. Costs were reduced by having the majority of the credits earned through 15 to 20-year conservation measures, so that these were paid for during the first 5 years, and subsequent permits were in the second year of the second permit were relatively inexpensive because they only needed to be maintained. The program has documented benefits to water quality. The program, just downstream from the cheese factory, the Middle Fork of Sugar Creek is now in full biological attainment by Ohio EPA standards. It is also a program that has not received any federal funding and paid its own way for staff at the local Soil and Water Conservation District office. It grew out of a community-based Sugar Creek project centered at the Ohio State University, which teamed up with local agencies such as the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, the Alpine Cheese Company, county commissioners, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Ohio Farm Bureau, Ohio Department of Agriculture, USDA, NRCS, and our local representative, Bob Gibbs. Prior to the Alpine Trading Program, our research team had several small grants from USDA, NSF, and EPA to study headwater streams and implement conservation measures. It's also part of Ohio State University's extension outreach funded by the Smith-Lever Act. The success of the Alpine Nutrient Trading Plan served as a springboard for the creation of the Muskingum River Watershed Water Quality Trading Plan in 2012. We started very small, but it spread then to these 21 counties who all wanted to be part of it. I have four specific recommendations for the future of water quality trading. One, water quality trading programs in Ohio should focus on minor NPDES permit holders. In Ohio, there are 3,341 active NPDES permits, according to Ohio EPA. About half the amount of water treated by NPDES permits comes from minor permits, which, like Alpine, have a design flow of less than 1 million gallons per day. Major permit holders tend to have more monitoring and more limits. One of the strongest arguments for focusing on water quality trading on the minor permits holders is the higher cost per gallon of treatment. According to Hartman and Cleland, the cost for facility upgrades for minor permits is anywhere between 2 and 7 times as great as the majors, depending on the phosphorus and nitrogen regulatory limits. Because of the high cost of treatment per gallon, minor permit holders are able to offer higher prices for nutrient credits if transaction costs can be kept low. This is why the Alpine plan was so effective, even though the cost per credit was relatively high. At the same time, when trading programs are started to solely benefit major permit holders, there's a drive to keep the cost per credit low, such as through reverse auctions, in order to match the low cost per gallon associated with the major permit facility upgrades. However, major and minor permit holders can team up in very creative ways. For example, a downstream point source could cost share with an upstream point source to conduct their facility upgrade upstream so that they could get below their permit level and recoup the cost through a negotiated sale of those credits. And there are other ways, too. The second point, community-based water quality trading programs at either the HUC 8 level or county level provide benefits over larger scale programs. We found that the idea of a trusted broker is very important, and we think that the soil and water districts are such an entity. Also, there can be trades within the same county jurisdiction between, if county commissioners are overseeing both the soil and water conservation district budget and the county wastewater treatment plant, then it makes sense to combine those two functions. A third point is that trading should focus on areas of most impact, headwaters and critical source areas. Studies have shown that about half the nitrogen in headwater streams makes it down to the fourth order streams. A long-term study in Illinois revealed that most of the, during rain events, we have most of the export of the nutrients. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Sorry. Did you finish your fourth point?
No. Go
ahead and finish.
I have one more point. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Locally based, my fourth point is that locally based programs are more likely to have creative solutions to achieve water quality objectives. In addition to the NRCS approved conservation measures, we could utilize each of our state's experiment stations more effectively if we allow the use of quote-unquote scientifically proven innovative conservation measures and focus more on appropriate suites of conservation measures that fit the local ecological zone and local farming practices. We've done this both in the statement of scientifically proven innovative conservation measures was put both in the Alpine as well as the Muskingum plans that were approved by Ohio EPA. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next witness is Mr. Carl Schaeffer. He's president of the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. I probably believe a farmer, too. And he's on here today also on behalf of the American Farm Bureau. Welcome.
Chairman Gibbs, Ranking Member Bishop, members of the subcommittee, I want to thank you for the invitation to testify here today. My name is Carl Schaeffer. I'm president of Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. I raise corn, soybeans, and wheat in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. I serve on the board of directors and the executive committee of the American Farm Bureau Federation. While Farm Bureau supports the concept of water quality trading, managing nutrients is complicated, and any trading system must consider this. Farm Bureau has a long history of supporting market-based approaches to improving the environment. We encourage states to consider trading, to help implement state water quality programs because trading and offsets can reduce costs associated with environmental improvements. Pennsylvania has a nutrient trading program in place, but as we can discuss further, there is a lack of demand even though farmers are generating credits. However, even with that history of support, farmers remain cautious of trading programs. The very nature of farming is growing a plant or animal for use in the food chain. The abstract idea of invisible credits is difficult for many farmers to embrace. Trading and offset programs are and should remain creatures of state law, and effective trading programs will not occur if EPA or states impose too many barriers. There are major scientific, market, regulatory challenges to water quality trading. The Clean Water Act leaves the task of controlling water pollution largely to the states, but EPA has pressured states to adopt standards and criteria based on nutrient levels found in perfect waters. This is unrealistic. Even worse, EPA now wants to change the baseline for Pennsylvania's existing trading programs, making it more difficult to generate credits. If properly designed and implemented, trading can help make reaching nutrient water quality standards more affordable. Trading assumes market participants have full information about the cost and effectiveness of their nutrient reduction options and can instantly, at little or no cost, get information on nutrient credit prices and quantities. However, people are faced with limited time, resources, skills, and market knowledge. Complex rules and procedures can result in poor buyer or seller participation and defeat the purpose of trading in the first place. Lastly, it's often assumed that agriculture can supply credits less expensively than other sources. Whether or not this is true depends heavily on the trading rules and procedures described previously. Farmers are deeply concerned about the environment. We constantly take advantage of new technology and new practices and programs as they become available to grow quality food products while protecting our natural resources. As I hope my remarks illustrate, the concept of trading has the potential to be a useful tool. As a concept, trading can make reaching nutrient water quality standards more affordable and attainable. However, in practice, trading is not always so simple, as regulatory and cost barriers can hinder the implementation of successful trading. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaeffer. Our next witness is Mr. Brent Farrell. He's the partner of the Troutman Sanders law firm, or LLP, I guess it's a law firm, right?
Correct.
And on behalf of the National Water Quality Trading Alliance, welcome.
Thank you. Chairman Gibbs, Ranking Member Bishop, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to talk about such an important topic. My name is Brent Fuell, and I am a partner with the law firm of Troutman Sanders. I'm here today representing the members of the new National Water Quality Trading Alliance, which is a consortium of leaders with an enduring interest in environmental protection. I personally have been involved in trading for the better part of 2 decades, both as an environmental lawyer and also as a former EPA water official. And those who know me know how passionate I am about this issue, because when done correctly, trading can accelerate the pace of environmental protection. We are beginning to see the positive and exciting results of trading in various locations around the U.S., including, Mr. Chairman, those affecting your district. And this hearing is about meeting the goals of the Clean Water Act. And to that end, I offer a few comments. First, we cannot expect 20th century tools to fix 21st century environmental problems. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, the Act has been critical to reducing point-to-point source or point source pollution from end-of-pipe discharges. And as we've heard today from the panelists, the success of point-to-point source trading has enabled us to do that in a more cost-effective manner. However, the low-hanging fruit of pollution reduction has already been harvested, and the remaining fruit is high in the branches and beyond reach unless we develop a new, more effective tool. According to EPA, 50% of our waters are still impaired, and of those, 60% comes from non-point source pollution, those sources that are beyond the reach of the Clean Water Act. One option would be to continue to squeeze point sources for more pollution reduction, or we could approach this problem in a very different manner by taking a landscape-based approach and offering incentives for sustainable and lasting solutions. Mr. Chair, for over 200 years, we have altered, developed, paved over, and replumbed the hydrology of our watersheds, and we are witnessing the consequences of those actions. Solving this problem, as we've discussed today, is not going to be easy, it's not going to be cheap, and poses significant challenges to communities, cities, and agriculture as agriculture and cities and communities continue to expand. Mother Nature is incredibly resilient and can withstand many insults, but the cumulative impacts of the myriad of diffuse sources and inputs in these watersheds will continue to degrade water quality in our ecosystems in ways that government alone cannot resolve. Which leads me to my second point. If we are to accelerate the pace of restoration, we must do so with tools like credit trading. It makes little sense to require a factory or a sewage treatment plant to install expensive treatment equipment if we can accomplish the same goal at a fraction of the cost through trading. Some have criticized trading as a scheme to rearrange the deck chairs or simply kick the can down the road, and I say absolutely not. Trading is no panacea, and it will not work everywhere, but it is a tool that enables EPA and the states to continue to apply the pressure and insist upon moving us all one watershed by one watershed toward the ultimate goal of cleaner water. And if we are to achieve this goal, EPA and the states, using all their regulatory authorities and tools, must continue to hold us all accountable to meet that end goal. Over the last few decades, we have moved from a handful of pilot projects, financially supported by EPA and USDA, to ones that are now self-sustaining, credible, and making a difference in cleaning up our waters. As Joe Whitworth, president of the Freshwater Trust, is fond of saying, we fix rivers, and indeed they are. He and his team are fixing rivers through trading. But not only are they restoring the waters required by the requirements of the Act, they are doing even more by restoring riparian habitats that provide important wildlife habitat, that filter non-point source pollution and restore the beauty of these systems. These are additional environmental benefits and social benefits that would not occur through traditional approaches. My third and final point, Mr. Chair, today's trading programs are smarter and better. Our investment in these markets are beginning to pay off, but there is still room for improvement. As we've heard today, we must continue to insist that these programs use best science, are transparent, and that the trades are verifiable, credible, and enforceable. And that is the important role of groups like the new Water Quality Trading Network, not to be confused with the Alliance, who is helping to clarify the science and promote best practices and better approaches. Regulators, too, have an important role in ensuring that these markets are working effectively to meet the end goal. In closing, if we are to meet the goals of the Clean Water Act, Mr. Chair, we must resolve to embrace new and innovative approaches such as water quality trading. I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Our next and last witness is Ms. Ann Swanson. She's the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Bay Commission. Welcome.
Thank you. Chairman Gibbs and Ranking Member Bishop and the other members of this committee, I really appreciate this time to come before you to testify about the economic potential of the nutrient trading program and very specifically to give some testimony related to our work on the Chesapeake Bay. By way of background, because I always think it's important to put a speaker into some kind of a context, the Chesapeake Bay Commission is a tri-state legislative commission. We're policymakers who operate in the General Assemblies of Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, 3 of the 6 states, and the lion's share of the watershed of the Chesapeake Bay. Our members are House and Senate members, as well as 3 of the members represent the governors of the 3 states, 3 are citizen members. In total, there are 21 members spanning those 3 states of Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. The Commission, in addition to pursuing legislation in all of those 3 states, frequently conducts in-depth research to look at emerging policy issues. We tackle everything from blue crabs to land use to biofuels. And in 2012, the Commission turned its attention to nutrient trading. I should be clear at this point about the Commission. The Commission remains neutral on whether it supports or doesn't support trading programs, in that the trading programs ended up becoming either law or regulation in the states before we actually had a position on the subject. So instead, what we decided to do is to ask 2 extremely fundamental questions about trading. The first is, what is the potential of nutrient trading to lower costs of TMDL compliance? Because remember, in the Chesapeake region, we're operating under the largest TMDL in the country. So that was one question. Are these cost savings touted real? The second question that we wanted to ask are, what are the critical elements that must be included in a trading program, regardless of a perfect situation for trading? But in the real world, what are some of the constraints that have to be put in place to make a trading program acceptable to the people and the living resources in the region? To do this work, we turned to RTI, an international independent nonprofit institute that provides research, development, and technical services to governments and commercial clients as well. They're one of the largest economics firms in the country. The second thing that we did that was pivotal, though, is we put together a panel of trading experts who then would guide and work with RTI. So it wasn't just an abstract economic study. The third thing that we did was, because we are a signatory to all the Bay Agreements and the Commission is one of the partners of the Chesapeake Bay program, is we were able to access the huge watershed models that are a part of our region. So the land use data that we would use and couple with the economics model was very real, since that data comes directly from the states. Well, we asked and answered those 2 questions. The first, and I should also comment, remember, we were not advocates for trading. Half our members were actually very skeptical on the subject. The others were strong supporters. Half were Democrats, half were Republicans, half come from rural areas, half come from urban areas. In the end, for the first question about potential, the answer was unequivocally yes, even with the constraints we put onto our question. We saw that there were very significant cost savings, particularly if you included the urban sector, not the point sources, beyond that, the stormwater sector, and the cost savings could be anywhere from 49 to 79%. The other thing I want to leave you is we asked about what are the critical elements, and there were 4. And they're in our testimony and in this report. But at the bottom line, one was you need a measurable, enforceable pollution cap to drive the trading programs forward. You heard about it from other people on this panel. The second is include stormwater. Stormwater is the most expensive thing to pay for. It's also where the greatest cost advantage can be in terms of trading. The third is protect and never abandon local water quality. We prohibited the degradation of local water quality in favor of a distance trade, and even with those constraints, there was anywhere from a 49 to a 70% cost savings. The fourth is we had a 2-to-1 trading ratio and even included a 38% transaction cost, 38%. It was one of the highest transaction costs we could find anywhere in the country, and we did that because we wanted to see, could you require significant transparency and verification? Would it still be advantageous, or did you have to throw things like transparency, verification, local water quality to the wind? And our study said you don't have to, that you can require robust verification and transparency, you can protect local water quality, you can address urban areas, and it can be potentially advantageous. But the devil is in the details, and Carl Schaeffer has warned of that. And the specifics of those rules are very different. We have 3 states with exceedingly different trading programs, all of which have significant advantages. So in closing, I'd just like to say that this report has all of that information and 56 additional pages of information that I could never say in 5 minutes. I will say that for a commission that was skeptical, we remain hopeful that there is great promise. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and I'll start a few questions here. The first question is a common theme here. I think everybody's in agreement that this can work if it's set up right.
Yeah.
I think a couple points. Voluntary aspect. Instead of having a regulatory agency come in and just, with a club and hammer, it's probably not going to work. But when we talk about credits and figuring out how much credit, or, compared to like a baseline concept, I'll just throw this out to anybody who wants to try to start answering. But how do you develop what the credit would be? And then, for example, you've got one farmer doing no-till technology, maybe doing cover crops, another farmer that isn't, and you start the program. Would that farmer that's been already implementing measures to protect water quality, would he get any credit? Or, how do we establish a baseline, or we kind of figure out what's been the experience of how you start developing the program when you got some participation, people doing the right thing or doing the thing that's more environmentally friendly than other people? How do we kind of move forward to start? What's been your experience? Anybody want to tackle that? Go ahead, Mr. Schaeffer.
You're absolutely right on a baseline, and this is what became one of the problems. You had a baseline, and then you added on, say, no-tilling would add up credits, cover cropping would add up credits. But if you have somebody that is a good steward of the land and already voluntarily doing these things, now EPA wants to try to come in and say, okay, this is the baseline after you're doing all this. Therefore, to go beyond that, the only thing left is to idle ground.
Yeah.
And that's really not acceptable to agriculture. I mean, EPA itself said in its TMDLs, probably 20% of the watershed in the Chesapeake Bay watershed is going to have to be idled to meet these numbers. That's a tough pill to swallow. It really is.
Well, Mr. Swanson, you talked about that several different states had totally different rules.
We do. So in the Chesapeake region, first of all, for example, if you take Virginia, Virginia sets its baseline based on practices. So there are 5 practices, for example, that the farmer needs to have in place if they're appropriate to that farm. And then above and beyond that, if they do more, it's tradable. In Maryland, for example, they set a performance baseline, where based on the TMDL, they've then done the math to figure out the per farm allocation. And if the farm is meeting that allocation through best management practices, then if it reduces its pollutant load still further, that delta is tradable. And so what you're doing is you're setting something where, let's say I'm a farmer that's already done a lot, a huge amount. Well, then I will be at baseline, and if I do more, then say I do a manure-to-energy facility or something like that that's really getting a lot more, then I can trade those credits. If I'm a farmer that hasn't done a lot, well, then I have to get to baseline before I can avail myself of trading. And that's how it works. Because remember, trading is about additionality. It's to do more and then be able to trade that more. And that's how it works in our region.
Okay. How do you factor in what the value of the credit will be? Is there a model, or how do you, anybody, you want to start? Go ahead.
I mean, in our region, we have an enormous suite of practices. Each one of those practices is then assigned an efficiency. Okay? The way that we've negotiated that efficiency is all of the states and EPA, we have big work groups that come together, we consult with experts, we consult with all the scientific literature as well as edge-of-field monitoring, and we come up with an efficiency, a pound per acre, pound per practice, something like that. And then we know what that practice is worth. So, for example, if you put a cover crop on an acre of land, and in our case, we must have 20 different variations on cover crops, maybe more. So let's say you have a rye cover crop, and we know how far it is from the closest tributary, because there's all kinds of delivery discounters, but then you actually have a number, and then you can add up the numbers. So if you have 27 acres of cover crops in a certain geolocation, then you know exactly what that's worth.
Okay. Before I yield to Mr. Bishop, just another question for you, I guess, Ms. Swanson.
Yeah.
Since you're, as you said, operating on the largest TMDL watershed
Yes.
in the country, and there's a lot more enforcement mechanisms going in there, I guess.
Yes.
In these others, you hear about soil and water maybe being the lead agency working with on the trading credits. So I'm assuming that in the Chesapeake, that the EPA's been more the lead agency, or who's been the lead agency or lead entity?
EPA has helped coordinate the Chesapeake Bay program, but the Chesapeake Bay program is made up of the 6 states, the Chesapeake Bay Commission, and the mayor of the District of Columbia as well.
Well, what entities, the Special Agricultural Ground, who's doing the verification that these practices are being implemented on?
We're actually working on that right now,
okay,
because in the past we didn't have the kind of verification that you now require with the TMDL. But in general, we tend to be reaching towards our districts, for example, our soil conservation districts, or the Maryland, for example, Maryland or Pennsylvania Department of Ag. But then they have to be working closely with their water quality agency, because their water quality agency ultimately has to sign on the dotted line. So one of the things we're doing right now is developing what's called the verification protocols. And it's a set of rules for stormwater and for agriculture and for anything basically that wants be credited in that model. And that same kind of verification will be required of trading. Now, I will say this. When a trade is involved, the level of verification goes up a notch than if you're just getting credit in the model. And rightly so, because usually the drivers, the purchasers, they're going to be permitted groups like waste treatment plants or MS4s. So.
Okay, that's helpful. Mr. Bishop, yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you for your testimony. One theme that sort of runs through the testimony of many of you, if not all of you, is the need for there to be a driver in order for a water quality trading market to actually function at an appropriate level. And so I have 2 questions, and I'll put it to each of you to take a crack at it. One, is it possible to have a successful trading program in the absence of a driver? And then the second is, if the driver is not a regulatory driver, which appears to be the most common or the most likely driver, what other drivers might possibly work? So whoever wants to start. Mr. Moore.
Yes, a good case would be the city of Columbus, Ohio, which has problems for its drinking water of high nitrates and treating atrazine, enormous expense involved. They don't, as far as their NPDES permit, it's not such a big issue, but it's the drinking water issue that would really bring them to the table to be able to want to fund upstream activities. So that might be one example.
Okay. Mr. Schaeffer, and then Mr. Fuell will go.
Yeah, the idea of a driver is a little deceiving. We have a driver in Pennsylvania. It's the TMDLs put on municipal treatment plants. But most of those municipal treatment plants were able to attain those numbers, so they don't need to do any trading. There's very few of them that really, there's some small ones now that are trading, and I have examples of farmers that are doing trading with them. But the majority of them, the constituents, the ratepayers, they would rather see their money go towards bricks and mortar. So they want the treatment plants upgraded rather than some abstract trading.
But in your case, the TMDL is in fact the regulatory driver, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah, yes, okay. Mr. Fuell?
Yeah, Mr. Bishop, I would argue that some driver needs to be there. It can be regulatory, but it also can be a threat of a regulatory driver. And EPA, under the Clean Water Act, does allow watersheds and regions to do pre-TMDL strategies. If there is an implementation, we understand the challenge with the TMDL is that EPA cannot force. There's no teeth in the TMDL for EPA. It's really at the state level for them to figure out how to achieve the goal of the TMDL. But with the concerns and anxiety that comes along with TMDLs, if you can promise a watershed that we will hold off on a TMDL, if you put in place an implementation plan for your watershed, then we will hold off on a TMDL. And so a pre-TMDL and the threat of a TMDL may be enough to actually create these markets.
Okay. Any, Mr. Tennant?
Just need to again mention that we've reached the point that we have on the Ohio River through without the regulatory driver. Brent might say there is some sense of an impending threat of one, but the credits that have been bought so far are based on stewardship concerns and can probably continue to some certain point. But his mention of the possibility of a pre-TMDL type of approach is very intriguing and certainly something that I think our project partners would like to think about.
Ms. Swanson?
So we worked with a very conservative economics firm, RTI, and I want to quote. It says, for a nutrient credit trading system to work, the first and most critical requirement is to define a measurable and enforceable cap. And in our region, of course, I've mentioned that that's the TMDL. What we have seen is in some situations, for example, with waste treatment plants, in Pennsylvania, most of the waste treatment plants have decided, no, we prefer to just do it on our own. We don't want to trade for agricultural credits or other credits. And that's very clear. And that goes back to market preference. You know, they prefer a more predictable situation. However, what we have seen in the region is that the MS4s, which really now, you know, much more there's a much stronger regulatory driver there than ever before. And what we're seeing is that the expense of controlling a pound of urban stormwater is so prohibitively expensive that they're reaching for trades. And if you look, for example, in Virginia, a huge number of the trades, more than 75 of the trades, have come from Department of Transportation or stormwater demands to buy credits. The other thing that we have seen, and my colleague from the Southern Bay talks about it, is trades within waste treatment plants, where they're trading within a permit bubble.
Thank you all very much. My time has expired. Just at the risk of being argumentative, it seems to me that a regulation or a threat of a regulation is essentially a distinction without a difference. I mean, it's basically the same driver. But with Mr. Chairman, I'll yield. Thank you.
Ms. Edwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses. I have a particular question because I've been interested in the idea, and NACWA has been very supportive of using green infrastructure techniques around stormwater management. And I'm looking at the requirements, and I hear Director Swanson talking about the importance of, you know, sort of where the market gets segregated when it comes to urban stormwater. And so I'm trying to figure out how it is that water systems can be encouraged to use green technologies, but still have the ability potentially to trade in a marketplace that's actually going to make a difference when it comes to the nutrient load. So help me out.
Well, I mean, your own sewage treatment plant comes immediately to mind with Blue Plains, and Blue Plains is absolutely cutting edge when it comes to this. So they're really looking, particularly in your northwestern quadrant, of how do we use green infrastructure in place of very, very substantial, for example, CSO tunnels. And so they're doing that work right now. And what they need to do is, of course, they need to find the locations where it's a very real green infrastructure advantage, and then they need to be applying those efficiencies. They need the verification then that it's really happening. The other thing I would caution is for the District of Columbia to be a winner, they would always have to essentially be looking for upstream advantage, so that that way the water, when it comes tumbling down, is cleaner coming into the city. If you were putting in green infrastructure south of the city, then the citizens of the district would be a loser. And so that's really important to consider.
And so when you would think about creating a marketplace in which the significant point source
Right.
elements would not then, I mean, there's a part of their requirement that they can't get around. So what would then be the incentive to develop these other techniques?
In my mind, that goes back to an enforceable cap. Because if you didn't have the District of Columbia being forced to do these kinds of upgrades, you wouldn't have a market emerging, and you wouldn't have these conversations going on at the level of earnest that they're going on.
So you don't think a trading market, and I think, Mr. Trowell, if you want to comment, you don't think a trading market would disincentivize the significant point sources from participating in the marketplace and developing new technologies?
No, quite the opposite.
Yeah, Ms. Edwards, I think there's a great opportunity, and I've had some great discussions with George Hawkins about ways that D.C. could save money, taxpayer money. And instead of requiring Blue Plains to put in additional treatment costs at tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, give them the opportunity to use a fraction of that to go up into the watershed, to put some of these practices on farms to reduce some of the non-point source pollution. And not only will you reduce nutrients and perhaps achieve their compliance obligations much more cost effectively, you're also going to be reducing other things like perhaps other contaminants that flow off of agricultural properties.
Thanks. And just a totally random question, but is there a way that you look at things like within, say, the Potomac region, if we're making greater investments in things like transit and other areas that actually then help to lower the nutrient contribution, do those things factor into the trading market?
In my mind, they should.
But they don't currently.
Well, but they can. In that, remember, if you're calculating nutrients, and the chairman asked the question earlier, how do you know? How do you know what something's worth? Well, if you think that you're doing something, say, related to transit, that is affecting, say, nitrogen deposition from the atmosphere, then what you need to do is convene a panel that can determine scientifically what that is worth per pound, of effort. And then once it is, then it can enter into the trading market. But you have to have some scientific basis for the efficiency of the calculation. It can't just be made up, and you absolutely can then.
Thanks, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I would really love it if we were able to, from a study standpoint, actually take a look at connecting the way that we're thinking about water quality and some of our other responsibilities when it comes to developing our transportation infrastructure, to see ways in which we can think of these things as related, and that we could, I don't know whether it's a study or something else, but figure out what that calculation is, because it could provide a great incentive for this committee, but also a real incentive for some of our heavily polluting urban areas to think differently about their investments in infrastructure.
Mr. Davis, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I got caught looking at my phone. I apologize. Thank you very much, everyone, for your testimony. Thank you for being here today. Very important issue, and I want to thank Chairman Gibbs for holding this hearing, and I want to thank Ranking Member Bishop for being here. And I'm still mad at him for throwing me out in the congressional baseball game last year, so I can't be nice to him here. Yeah, I'll get you back this year, buddy. Hey, you know, nobody thought we could have fun at these hearings, right? You guys can smile. It's okay. Mr. Schaeffer, got a question for you. In your testimony, you note that the EPA often focuses more on assigning blame than finding solutions. I sense a real disconnect between the EPA and the ag community. And in the Farm Bill, one of my top priorities was to give farmers a place at the table when it came to EPA regulations, and we were successful. Ag now has a voice on EPA Science Advisory Committee. I want to know from you, sir, what else can be done to bridge the gap between the ag community and the EPA, especially on the issue of water quality trading?
I think, you know, I'd like to turn one of Mr. Bishop's comments around, and Mr. Farrell said it too. Why not implement the threat of more regulation? Why not implement reducing the regulation in return for more nutrient trading? Reverse that. I think that would be a better way to go, and more definitely from agriculture's point of view, they'd have a lot more interest in that. And so that's one way to do it that I think. But, you know, I know a farmer who does trading with a small municipal treatment center, and he gets $40 per acre. Now, $20 is for no-tilling, and $20 is for cover crop. And that doesn't cover the cost of those two practices. But then you add on $3,000 for third-party verification. It's not that lucrative of a deal. So some way we have to get better numbers in there, because what they're probably saving that small municipal treatment center is a lot more than what they're putting out for a trading thing. So we need to have more demand, and maybe a way to do that demand instead of threaten more regulation is threaten to reduce some regulation in return for more practices.
Well, I mean, that actually goes into my next question, that you would consider one of the barriers to the operation of the marketplace when it comes to our ag community not wanting to take advantage because the cost-benefit ratio is not working out for them, as you just said. Do you have any examples of some other potential barriers, or does anybody else on the panel want to address this question?
Well, one other barrier, as I said, is the fact that EPA keeps moving the goalpost, and every time you think you're in a position that you could go out and do some trading, if your numbers get changed, you throw up your hands pretty quick, and that's counterproductive, very counterproductive.
Does anybody want to, you know what? Let's go, we'll go left to right. Mr. Fuell?
Fuel. Yeah.
Fuel?
Fuel, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Davis, we talked about it briefly, a little bit about baseline. Baseline can encourage trading, or it can kill trading. And if your baseline is too high and you expect your ag producers to reduce 80% of their runoff before they can even begin to trade, they're not going to trade. There's absolutely no incentive whatsoever. So there does have to be a look at the baseline. That's number one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore.
Yes, I'd like to build on Mr. Schaeffer's point, and that was how to reverse the incentive. In alpine cheese, one of the conservation measures we use is called milk house waste. It was found that this is what comes out of a dairy parlor when they milk the cows, and it's a mixture of a number of things, but it goes through a pipe, usually into a ditch or a stream directly. EPA, when we informed them about that, wanted to fine all the farmers immediately, and we were able then to make the argument that if it comes out of a pipe and if they're going to fine the farmers, why not be proactive and then give a better credit ratio to those same farmers. So we actually got a 1-to-1 ratio on that. It was actually adopted by other trading plans as well. and it's been a very successful plan, so it makes your point.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Mr.
One point I wanted to make was in regards to the concept of the trading ratio. And the trading ratio, if, for example, in Virginia, is applied to the point source and non-point source trades. I'll give you an example. If a point source like a wastewater facility needed to come up with 1,000 credits or pounds of nitrogen, they would have to go to, if they wanted to go to a non-point source, the non-point source would have to remove 2,000 pounds of nutrients to be able to make that trade. You've instantly devalued the nutrient credits that are being generated by agriculture by putting that ratio into place. And the reason that ratio is into place is because there's concerns and fears over uncertainty and measurement and verification of the credits that are generated by agriculture. I would hold that we should go after that uncertainty, find out what it is, measure it, and stop putting these kind of arbitrary trading ratios and interfering with these trades, because when you do things like the baseline effect and then you add the trading ratio on top of that, you will not have trading between point source and non-point source in Virginia.
Great. Hey, thank you all very, very much for being here and for your testimony and for your educating us on a very important program. I yield back. I
want to have a little discussion here. We're talking about point source and non-point source trading, and the concern, I think you just said it, the verification, especially in ag. And maybe Dr. Moore, the experience there in the Alpine project, in working with about, I don't know, 100 or so Amish farmers, I believe. How did the verification program work, and kind of go through the process a little bit?
Sure. That was one of our roles in the program, actually, to bring different parties together to try to lower the transaction cost on the verification. We held a meeting between Ohio EPA, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and I can remember it very, in the Holmes County Soil and Water Conservation District, I can remember it very vividly. It was in the entomology building at Ohio, at OERDC, Ohio Agricultural Research and Development Center. What we did is we created an MOU between the Ohio EPA and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, because they already conduct a verification process at the Soil and Water Conservation District. So there's a certain percentage of those that they go back and then resample after somebody has put in a conservation measure just to verify those. So we said, why reinvent the wheel when you already got a system like that? So we were able then to get people together and create an MOU. That MOU was also used in other trading systems.
Yes.
One thing I would just caution is, at the end of the day, the nutrient credit trading program is about improving water quality. And when we did our study, what we saw is that even with transaction costs, once the market can get robust, and it was some kind of a driver that really pushed it to that robust place, that you could require the verification and still have a robust market. In terms of the trading ratios, in our region, none of our states operate on a 1-to-1 ratio. None of them do. Not one of them. Now, in Virginia, they have a 2-to-1 ratio for point to non-point, but even in the other states, there is a 10% set aside or a 10% retirement. So they're at least doing a 1.1 to 1. And the reason is because with non-point sources, there never is that same level of suredness. And at the end of the day, it's about water quality and making sure that you're improving water quality, however incremental that may be. So just keep that in mind.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, can I also emphasize, I think as Ms. Swanson has talked about, this is all about improving water quality, but I think the benefits that I've seen and many of us have seen with these trading programs is you're getting folks to actually work together to resolve big, complicated problems. So when you've got the agriculture community talking with watershed groups, environmental groups, and municipal leaders, it's a good thing because people are actually trying to solve big problems. They feel good about it. And it's working in many cases. I think Peter can attest to that in the ORB.
Yeah. Yeah, the statement I made in our project video that once you get people sitting around the table talking about our problem instead of pointing fingers, you make progress when we all claim ownership and say, how can we work together to solve it?
I guess in that realm, I know, of course, Dr. Moore's, that Alpine project started back in the early 2000s, and I know Mr. Tennant has a project that's going off, and others have mentioned. Is there any policy initiatives that should be at the federal level that should be addressed, or what hurdles has there been that we could look at, that we should look at? Because personally, I think Mr. Bishop is too. We want a program like this to work because we're all got the end goal. It's cleaner water for all our water bodies across the country, and we don't want the federal government to be an impediment to that. But go ahead. You got the gist of my question, I guess.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. First of all, having the lead at EPA is definitely committed to doing this, but they realize it's going to happen at the state and local level. I think one of the biggest threats right now is perhaps zealous litigants, those that are opposed to trading, that see it as an antithesis to the Clean Water Act. That's a big threat. Now, there may be some disagreement on this panel and even in this room whether or not we need some type of authorizing rule. I think that actually, in my personal view, I think that would be helpful to have that in place to protect these trading programs for doing the things that they need to do.
I guess just to follow up on that, I wanted to ask Dr. Moore, has Ohio set up any rules on trading rules? Has that anything? Yeah.
We have formal trading rules in Ohio now. Mm-hmm.
And of course, obviously the three states over here, Ms. Swanson does. Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we have formal trading rules, and like I said, I still get back to everybody has to be treated fairly, or it's not going to work. It has to be a win for both sides. And if you let the states put that together without EPA interfering in it and setting guidelines and holding their gun at somebody's head, yeah, I think things are just going to work better, and that's going to be. Yeah.
This goes back to my old premise: one-size-fits-all policy out of Washington D.C. is probably not too workable. Virginia, Hamptons.
Yes, we've got rules for trading in Virginia, quite extensive. We've got statute as well as regulation and guidance.
Okay, so my final thought on this. Did I see a hand go up? Oh, go ahead.
Something for your own benefit, Mr. Chairman, is in the Chesapeake, because we have three such different programs, and you're thinking about, multiple states, is the EPA is now just issuing now a series of trading memoranda, technical memoranda on different aspects of trading, where they're trying to get some level of uniformity amongst the different states. So certain things related to baseline and other or offsets, that when the EPA is considering the TMDL, that those things will factor in. So you may want to look at the suite. There's about 12 of them, of technical memoranda dealing with trading-related issues.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Schaeffer.
Just you hit the nail on the head when you said one size doesn't fit all. The topography in Pennsylvania is entirely different than the topography in Maryland or Virginia or Ohio. So that's why you have to have the states have the affordability of designing their own programs.
I'm in agreement. I think the challenge is when you have water sheds that go across state lines. Yeah. And, if we had some of that with acid rain, I think, years ago, that discussion. So having a broad set of parameters might make some sense as long as it doesn't get too much in the details and let states give as much flexibility. And we've been trying to do some of that in some of the other areas in this committee. It's, how the relationship between the U.S. EPA and state EPAs and how they implement the Clean Water Act in general. And it's a challenge that, needs worked on. But, I just think that, the states can adopt it into policies. And the other final thought, for this thing to work the way it really needs to work, especially when you're trying to address the non-point sources, you know, the voluntary aspect. Now, you got a little unique situation, I think, with your TMDL issue, but in a lot of watersheds aren't at that point yet where they can do some things like was commented earlier to head off a regulatory hammer and address that. And because you know the people in the agricultural sector and other sectors want to do the right thing, and our Alpine cheese is a great example where we had a plant that wanted to expand, and without doing this, they were going to have to leave, close it down, and we cleaned up the watershed, and we kept those milk producers, dairy farmers, with a market, and so it was a win-win. So this can be done in a way that's a win-win situation, but you've got to have some common sense and make some sense. But it's been great hearing from all of you today, and I don't know if Mr. Bishop. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick. I think a very important point that's been made is the goal here is the net improvement in the overall quality of the water body, and that suggests that two pieces of this process require very careful attention. One is verification. That is to say that the credit that's being purchased actually exists. And then the second is the issue of ratios as to whether or not a quantity, if you will, of a nutrient at point source is the same as the quality of a nutrient or quantity, pardon me, further away from the body of water that you're trying to protect. And so I guess my question, and I would ask if whoever answers it to be exceedingly brief, are the mechanisms that we currently have in place to deal with verification and ratios, and I know they differ from state to state, but are those mechanisms adequate, or is there some improvement that can be undertaken either by the states or with some incentive from the feds? So, yeah, Mr. Schaeffer.
One idea I think would be good is to involve the soil and water conservation districts and have them as part of the verification process, because they already work with the components, and it could be where you could pay them a nominal fee to have them do the verification instead of a third party that's charging an exorbitant fee. So that's just an idea.
Thank you.
Well, that's yield a second. That's exactly what happened in the Alpine. Soil and Water got involved because of the culture, the Amish culture, having people from Chicago or Washington, D.C. come out to the farms probably wasn't too amenable, and they had the working relationship, and that there was a trust factor there. So I think for this to really work, the local soil and water people need to be really the facilitators in the agricultural sector.
Yeah, just to follow exactly. Just to follow up on that, initially the Ohio EPA had asked that they could do the verifying, and that's when we had the MOU. But in addition to that, soil and water does go out to the farms, and that's acceptable to the farming community because of that high level of trust.
Dr. Plattel.
One thing to consider is when we do TMDLs, and that tends to be the regulatory driver, there's a lot of focus on the front end of doing all the calculations and coming up with, okay, the point sources are going to get this load and the non-point sources are going to get these loads. But at that point, the discussion that includes all the parties kind of stops. All of a sudden, the point sources know what they're supposed to do, and the non-point sources now are under the gun to do things that they're not prepared to do. I would argue that process of working together on what the TMDL should look like should continue. There should be an open discussion of all the members on a watershed of what is the best approach to removing nutrients from that watershed, and what is the best way to do it at the lowest cost. So I think the way that we go about addressing TMDLs is a bit outdated, and we need to start thinking about more of a community-based approach to addressing these problems instead of we, they, and all it does is cause a lot of this between the parties.
I was total agreement with what's been said about the verification aspect. I wanted to just say something about the ratios. In our Ohio River Basin project, we're relying on a water quality model that allows us to equate what is a pound of nitrogen removed in Columbus on the Scioto River, how does that relate to a pound of nitrogen removal required at Cincinnati, downstream on the Ohio River. We have that model up and running for about 50% of the watershed, including pretty much all of the state of Ohio. Where we have that in place, it gives us some degree of certainty about the equivalency of the two sides of the trade. We need to extend that model to the rest of our watershed in order to be able to go basin-wide to include all of our Ohio River watershed.
All right. I'm sorry, Ms. Swanson.
At the expense of bringing up something that might be a little bit uncomfortable, you need to consider transparency. And all of our states have had to do that, in general, confidentiality has been extended to farmers. However, in the situation of a trade, we've had to rethink that to determine whether in cases where a point source of some type is buying credits from a farm, did those practices need to be fully disclosed. And so as you pursue trading programs in other areas, keep that in mind, because the general public is going to want to know how those trades occurred and what are they trading for, and so that the issues of farm confidentiality do come up.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Dr. Moore.
Yes, I have one thing I'd just like you to consider, and that's that the TMDLs are normally calculated based on normal summer flows is typical. I mean, they bring other things into consideration, but one thing that seems to be quite missing in the analysis is our rain events. And most
our
rain events, or the big storms, most of the phosphorus and nitrogen is actually exported during those really big rain events, as any farmer knows, as they've seen their soil wash away. So that's something that needs to be addressed, and I don't think we've addressed it enough.
All right. Thank you all very, very much. It's been a very helpful hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, too, and I want to thank you all for coming in. It has been helpful. And before we close here, I ask unanimous consent that the hearing record be kept open for 30 days after this hearing in order to accept other submissions of written testimony for the hearing record. Without objection, so ordered. And again, thank you, and that concludes today's hearing.